Okay, now we're now down to our final topic, okay? And this is going to be a short one, a quick one. I covered earlier, we talked about acoustics. So you know how to sort of already have the knowledge to how to treat your room, at least do some acoustic treatment for the room. So what about setting up, right, your home studio itself? What are the sort of equipment? So let's dive into it, okay? There will be 10, I would say, right? Home studio essentials, 10 important things that you need for your home studio. Number one, obviously, nowadays everything is digital. You need a computer or a laptop, lah. Okay. Now, I seriously need a laptop because every week I've been bringing my computer PC, right? That's the next thing I definitely want to get, a proper laptop for audio. So number two, right, your DAW. As I mentioned, the DAW actually refers to the entire system, right? Your software as well. Now, audio interface. When everyone asks me, right, what kind of audio interface should I get? I always ask them back these questions. Number one, of course, your budget lah. How much are you willing to spend? Then number two, what are your I/O requirements? I/O here means your input and output requirements. It means that, okay, now for what you need, how many channels of input you will need? Is it one? Is it two? Is it four? You have to take into account, you have to plan. Then you select it accordingly. Also very important, you want to think about future. Will you need to expand in the future? Will you need a little bit more channels? So for example, maybe in the future, right, you may want to start recording drums. Or maybe you want to record a group of musicians together. Then you're going to need 6, 8 inputs, you see. If you want to go beyond that, maybe you need an interface which has ADAT, optical expansion. You can add another external preamp, 8 channels, and then expand. You have to think about that as well, all right? So because if you kind of buy one now that has only 2 inputs, then when it comes time in the future, if you know in the future you need to expand, mean you got to buy a totally new one, for example. Okay, microphones, obviously, okay? So we know what kind of microphones you want to choose, whether you're dynamic condenser or ribbon. Headphones, okay? Closed or open back, okay, and or monitors. Headphones, right, you have a closed back, you have open back types of headphones as well. Both of them have their own characteristics and you have your personal preferences. I say and or monitors because increasingly now a lot of people work mobile and or laptops, or they may not have a good enough environment to put speakers, you know. So headphones is getting increasingly popular, right? Especially now during these times. Mini controller, very important. Third-party plugins, right? I mentioned earlier, okay, what sort of plugins you want to get besides the stock ones, right? You know, what kind of third-party plugins you want to get as well. Then, of course, you have all your accessories, your cable stands, chairs, etc. You know, some of these things are important. Chair, for example, right? It's something we neglect, but if you spend a lot of time, it's actually really, really a good investment to invest in a good chair, right? I only got myself a good chair very recently, only like a year ago, one year ago, and it's like wow, it made such a big difference when I used to, you know, with the normal kind of a chair and all that, right? Wow, you always used to have get back aches, but ever since I started using a proper office chair with the proper support, right? Even though it's expensive, but suddenly all those, you know, I didn't have any back problems or issues anymore. Okay, so even these kind of things, right? Small things can be important. And very important, backup storage. Always please have some kind of backup, right? Either a thumb drive or an external hard drive, or you have some subscribe to some cloud-based storage. That is very important, right? I can't remember the number of times where, you know, bands have come back to me and say, I lost my master, my hard drive got corrupted. You are very lucky that I still keep the masters, right? Otherwise, you know, it's like, what happens if you forever lost your data and all? That sometimes could cost you a lot of things. Okay, how many things is that already? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Acoustic treatment, which I mentioned earlier. Moving forward, setting up your room. Choose the best room. Now, so what are the things you want to consider? Earlier on I mentioned your ratios, right? Try and see, try and measure in your room, go inside your house and see if you can identify a room which, right, has got as close as possible to those ratios, okay? Number one, you will want to avoid small spaces. Now, smaller spaces, smaller rooms will always give the most problems, right? Because the wall, the dimensions are so close, the reflections are the strongest. Your frequency will always be most uneven. Small rooms will always have problems compared to bigger rooms. Noise consideration. Is there traffic? Is there neighbors? Right? Maybe do you have, in a place where you get a lot of kids running around, making a lot of noise. Plumbing, okay? Plumbing. Sometimes you never know. If you live in a condo, sometimes you have this issue. The pipe, the noise, sometimes if somebody flush the toilet, you hear or not? Okay. HVAC, right? Heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Is air conditioning, right? Do you have like a compressor running somewhere? You can hear the noise. Or natural sounds, for example, animals, wind or rain. Is this an issue? Okay, these are things you want to consider. What about the flooring? Now, hard floors are actually preferable. For example, concrete or wood floor, right, or timber floor, etc. Now, carpets, you can always buy a carpet and add a carpet later if you want. Okay, but generally a hard floor is preferable. Next point, refer to chapter 13. Okay, the previous one, acoustics. Okay. Now, very quickly, now this one is just going to go to outline to some diagrams. So a basic home studio setup would be your DAW, your computer, your interface, your source, your speakers, right? And your monitors, your playback, your amplifiers. How about making the connections, right? So this going back again to an earlier topic about, right, the signal flow, right, which was one of the previous weeks. You have your mic inputs, your mics, your DIs, your line level inputs, right? Usually these are all your quarter-inch TRS or TS for your guitars, bass, and line level devices. For example, maybe a keyboard, okay? Your phantom power, okay, be aware, okay, whether your inputs have phantom power or not. Most of them will have, and some interfaces will also have what we call the high Z. High Z is the high impedance switch. So this one means that you can directly plug in your guitar or bass into it. Input gain knob, output level knob, headphone output, mix knob for direct monitoring. Okay, I take this example. This is the Steinberg UR22 right? So most of the interfaces will have that already. Now these are the back portions. You have your outputs. You have, for instance, right, digital I/O. So some will have a digital input output, your SPDIF, your ADAT, ASCPU, etc. Now some will have the MIDI ports, right? If you have a MIDI port, that's great, okay? Because means that you don't have to use a separate USB input for that. Then your main connection to your DAW. Okay, power supply. Now some will have an external power supply. Some interfaces can be USB bus powered. Here is the source of debate actually. Now most people would argue, most car professionals would argue to have something that has an external power supply, because the USB power, right, there is a kind of a limit. So generally speaking, if you have a little bit more power supply, right, can deliver a stronger voltage, it's generally better, right? It gives a bit more headroom. Let's move on. So this is a much more complicated setup, for example, okay? So this is, let's say, using an 8-channel, 8-input interface. This one, it will be a little bit more complicated, and this is something you can go back and you can sort of study, right? So this is what, for example, if you are recording up to 8 and up to 16 or maybe 24 channels. Not going to go into this. It's going to be just something for your own reference as well. I guess this will bring us to the end and the conclusion of not only just the theory lessons, but the workshop as a whole. Right. So thank you guys. Right. All of you have been amazing and wonderful participants and students. Right. I really appreciate. I hope you guys have found the whole session, entire workshop really beneficial. Take all the information and the experience that you have back to where you are and apply whatever that you can back to your own projects, back to your own productions or whatever you are doing. Just a quick reminder, there is the mixing contest. Right, I'll be sending those files out to you, right? And I'll contact you guys again, right, regarding when the deadline is supposed to be, when you have to submit. We'll talk about this a little bit later. So thank you once again very much. Okay, I hopefully see you again next year. Hopefully see you in another future workshop or future events. Right, again, you can always get in touch and contact me. We'll still have this group. Right, if you have any sort of further questions, any things you want to cover, any things you want me to explain personally, you can always just get in touch with me directly lah. Okay, so I suppose this will be brings us to the end. Okay, we'll see you again next time. All right.